Defending National League champions last season was the Philadelphia Phillies. A lot of people were surprised they made it all the way to the World Series, but not here on the OK Baseball podcast. We're going to talk with Francisco Rojas and another team preview here at a Route Report edition of OBP. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of the Route Report here at OBP, the OK Baseball podcast, where everything is just a little bit more than okay when we talk baseball on this show, presented by Slasher Sports. We're going to talk the Philadelphia Phillies today in our team previews as we continue on with covering all 30 teams before opening day. And with me for another year, Francisco Rojas, the bringing it back from the shift. And I got to ask, are you thinking about maybe changing that name a little bit to the restricted shift or shiftless or anything like that?
Absolutely not. It will never change. There's a reason why it's the shift. The shift will live on, Christian. The shift will live on.
I love it. Well, maybe a little like carrot with the top. Maybe put the outfield shift because the outfield can still shift. Right. But regardless, no restrictions on that show. Definitely check it out. The Shift on YouTube. Awesome stuff they got. You got a nice co-host now over there. A brand new season for your show. So definitely check that out. Check them out on Twitter as well as Rojas_media_. And all that stuff will be in the episode description below. And we'll recap that at the end of this episode also. But Frankie, man, we got to talk. I mean, we had some good conversations last year with the Philadelphia Phillies with, at the beginning of the season, a lot of question marks. I think that's what we were talking. We had did the preview last year, and there was a huge free agency class that came in from Philadelphia. And I remember the question that we asked was, can they make the playoffs? Not can they make the World Series, but can they get to that playoff? Can they get over that hump of being a middle of the pack 81 team at 500? Obviously that worked out. But at the beginning of the season, it didn't look that was the case. Manager Joe Girardi, if you remember, that was only last season, even though it feels like a decade ago now, was fired. In comes this new manager, and it seems like the management change turned into be a pleasant surprise. Take me back to 2022 and that management change. I'm sure that felt great, obviously getting to the World Series and now sitting where you're at now.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought up the beginning of last season and the front office decision to fire Girardi, because I'll be real, Christian, like I don't know if I was in the minority or if I was in the majority. A lot of Phillies fans didn't like what Joe Girardi brought to the table. Obviously, like, let's be honest, they were right. They were right in the end. They were able to get to the World Series. But before I get to that, I don't know if I was in the majority or in the minority, because I didn't think that it was a manager problem. I thought that it was a roster construction problem. I thought that it might have been a culture problem in the locker room. And I didn't think that hiring a manager that didn't really have any managerial experience in Major League Baseball was really going to do anything. I don't know if you remember, Christian, after Girardi got fired last year, I think Ken Rosenthal put a piece out in The Athletic saying that, the Girardi wasn't the problem. That's not going to do anything for the Phillies. Like there are larger problems here than the manager. And look, Ken Rosenthal admitted he was wrong. After the Phillies they were on about a 95 win pace with Rob Thompson after they got rid of Girardi and brought in Rob Thompson. And look, I mean, I was wrong. I didn't think that you could make a change like that in baseball and that really be that big of a difference, because it was 100% a huge difference. I really think that out of all of the four major sports, that baseball is probably, having the manager or coach, whatever you want to call it. I didn't think it was a huge difference maker. It was at the bottom. It was at the bottom of that list out of all the four major sports. Right. But the Phillies, they proved to be that exception last year. I mean, Topper came in and I guess it was just a different vibe around the clubhouse. It was a lot looser. The players, it just seemed like they wanted to play for Topper more than they wanted to play for Joe Girardi. I still think it was a little overblown that the players didn't like playing for Joe Girardi. But man, that was a huge difference. And man, I think it was probably a mix of the team wasn't a 10 below 500, winning team. I didn't think that they were that type of team anyway. I thought they were going to turn around a little bit, but obviously having Rob Thompson at the helm was a difference maker. And I'm excited that he's the manager going forward.
Yeah, it's really interesting because usually you don't see a team fire their manager and then make it to the World Series. Could you imagine if they decided not to keep Thompson after that run and you stayed interim? I mean, there would be riots on. You think that you had to keep the Crisco on the telephone poles in Philadelphia for the Super Bowl, let alone if you would have fired Rob Thompson after that. But yeah, I agree. 87 and 75 was the final record for the Phillies in 2022. That was good enough for third place in the NL East. Couldn't win the NL East, but got them to the World Series. Obviously, I think they wound up being winning that overall afterwards, seeing the Braves and the Mets both getting eliminated early in the playoffs. Moving forward to 2023, you talk about how this Philadelphia Phillies team shocked and awed towards the end of the season, was in a 95 win pace with Thompson and get themselves to the World Series, only to lose to the Houston Astros, who just seem to be unstoppable right now. Take me through the free agency. Obviously, Trey Turner comes over from Philadelphia, and that is a huge addition. I mean, just absolute huge addition coming to Philadelphia after being with the Dodgers. What I'm asking here, I guess, is the last two seasons, I feel like Philadelphia has really, and I mean, it could even be longer than that, but this new team of Philadelphia has really been added in free agency over the last 2 years. What's more of an important free agency for you? Last year when they signed guys like Schwarber, or maybe this year when they brought in Trey Turner. What's the most important free agency for this team, last year or this year's?
So I thought last year Dombrowski did a good job. He brought in Schwarber, he brought in Castellanos. Look, I don't think anybody expected the type of year from Castellanos last year. Like he was awful. I mean, he was a negative wins above replacement player if I'm not mistaken. Castellanos, Schwarber, I thought it was a good offseason last year for Dombrowski. I'm trying to think of I forget who I wanted them to go out after last season in free agency, but I thought Dombrowski and Fold did an okay job last offseason, but I thought they could have done a little better. It proved that all you had to do was get to the playoffs, and even if it's the last wild card spot, and you could get to the World Series. Like, they caught lightning in a bottle. Let's keep it a buck. They caught lightning in a bottle at the right time. They got hot, but that's what baseball's all about, man. And the formula worked up until you had to play the best team in the sport right now. So go ahead.
I was going to say, with the fact that obviously your title is called The Shift of your show, I guess we have to bring up the question about the rule changes coming in 2023. Philadelphia is not known for being a defensive team. And we can see that there's a lot of defensive metrics that were not in favor of Philadelphia. It seems like they took offense over defense. Hey, it worked out for them. They found their way into the World Series. But with shift restrictions in the infield, obviously having defensive woes in the outfield, how do you think that's going to look for this Philadelphia team in 2023?
So obviously the addition of Turner, huge. He's a very good defensive player. He's going to be paired with Bryson Stott, who's going to be at second base this year. It's going to be his primary position, obviously, with the addition of Trey Turner. Stott last year was a pretty good defensive second baseman. He was better over at second than he was at short. So I like the middle of the infield. I love Turner and Stott as a combo. I think they're good there. Alec Bohm got a little better as the year went on. He's still not a great defensive third baseman. A lot of people here in Philadelphia like to say that, oh, look, he got better, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, he still isn't, he's not on par to be a good defensive third baseman. So, but with Bohm, it's more we want more out of the bat with Bohm. Rhys Hoskins, not a great defensive first baseman. He catches a lot of flack here in Philly for a few of his, you know, defensive miscues, especially in the playoffs. They like to say that he cost them the World Series, which is not true. The bats did not show up in the World Series. They got no hit. But an interesting one to watch this year, which I think is, I'm, I don't know how I feel about it because he was terrible. He's been a terrible outfielder, but we saw how good he was for the Phils in the playoffs. I mean, he made some iconic, incredible defensive plays for the Phils, especially in the World Series. I think the last out on right field, Nick Castellanos has talked about, well, hey, I think he says he gets bored out in the outfield in the regular season. He said it gets boring out there night in and night out, just sitting out there. But he said that going back to the World Series, he feels like the way he played in the playoffs, he's going to use that as motivation to kind of play like that every night. Now, I don't know if I believe him. I want to see him do that rather than him just talk about, oh, well, you know, I'm motivated now. You know, Paco Figueroa is going to have me in check. Like, prove it to me before you do all this talk. But at the end of the day, like the point I want to make is that the defense still isn't like phenomenal. I'd like to mention JT Realmuto, the great defensive catcher. He's the best catcher in the game. But it's really going to be more weighted on the bats, especially like I mentioned Nick Castellanos. It's huge for him to have a huge year this year, especially with Harper out until the All-Star break. Like Nick Castellanos has to have a big year. At least he doesn't have to have a monster year, but he has to at least be the hitter he was in Detroit, where he was a very good, consistent hitter with Detroit. So it's more about the bats. It's more about Castellanos coming up big this year. I think Alec Boehm needs to take a step forward. Bryson Stott as well. They need to take steps forward, even with the addition of, you know, Trey Turner in the lineup. It's even more on the staff and it's more on the bullpen now because the bullpen, they added a lot of key pieces with Gregory Soto, Craig Kimbrell. Kimbrell's a really interesting one to watch. What's his name? Strom. I can't think of the lefty's name right now. Maybe you can help me out, Christian.
Yeah, Matt Strom. Yep.
Matt Strom, right? Matt Strom. That's a big one too. He's a pretty solid reliever. And then you re-sign Sir Anthony and Jose Alvarado to extensions. It's going to be really interesting to watch the bullpen, and then with the staff, you added Taijuan Walker, and I know you want to talk prospects at some point. Like Andrew Painter is a huge one. He might make the rotation, he might not. Even if he doesn't, they still have Bailey Falter there at the back end of the bullpen. I think would be slotted in there. But I think when talking about the defense, defense isn't going to be great. It could be upgraded, especially with Trey Turner there. But I still think it's more about the bats. It's more about starting pitching in the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean that's what happened, worked out for him last year. But it's gonna come into be at least to be an interesting conversation, especially at the beginning of the year, to see what goes on with the shift and how teams are reacting and moving around, and if the outfield decides to shift as well, and what a team like Philadelphia, who had success offensively but wasn't so great defensively, how they act. That's something that I'm really interested in early in the season, especially. And he kind of mentioned to it earlier. Bryce Harper is not going to be on that opening day roster. Obviously, he is still dealing with his injury. He'll be back soon. We'll see him back soon, but not soon enough to start the season with the Phils. And that's obviously a big player that you're missing out on. You're talking MVP caliber Bryce Harper. If he's healthy and he can get to 150 games a season, you bet that he's going to be in that MVP conversation. I mean, it's just safe to say that. However, he's going into his age 31 season this year, dealing with some few injuries over the past few seasons. You got to put the question marks up. I'm not saying maybe red flags or anything, but at least question marks on how he can perform and stay longevity wise. You got to keep that into perspective at least. However, when he comes back, I'm sure that he will be just fine. What's your thoughts on Bryce Harper and his recovery? How do the Phils get through the games without him? And what do you expect from him once he returns?
Well, so I kind of, mentioned this, just a minute or two ago. It's really, really, really look, the first thing I want to say is that they proved they could play well without him last year when he was out of the lineup. I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think they were 36-26 without Harper in the lineup last year. Now, obviously, you don't want Bryce out of the lineup. Of course, I want. I mean, it's a disgrace that he was 17th on MLB's top 100. I could rant about that for 3 hours straight, but the guy's a top 5, top 10 player in baseball. We all know that. Mr. Whatever. I'm not. All right, I don't want to get too off track here. The Phillies. I want Bryce. I want Bryce Harper in the lineup, but the Phillies have been able to prove that they can play well without him. But at the same time, the Phillies, Castellanos has to have a bounce back year. You can't just rely on Trey Turner to come in and automatically, make this lineup a top 5 lineup in baseball, because they're not, unless someone like a Derek Hall steps up a little bit this year. He came up last year with the Phils, and I think he hit a bomb in his first at bat. But he's someone that still has to prove himself. Derek Hall, Alec Boehm, again, still hasn't been able to prove it with the bat, really, besides his rookie season, and that was 40 games in the COVID season. Bryson Stott, like I mentioned earlier, I think has to prove that he can, take a step forward with the bat. I'm not asking for 25 to 30 home runs and a 400 on base percentage. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for, maybe a little above average OPS plus. That's what I'm asking for Bryson Stott. But I think for the most part, it's going to have to be your Schwarbers. It's going to have to be your Turners, your Real Mutos. I'd like to see Brandon Marsh step up a little bit this year. I think he came to the Phils, and overall his offensive numbers were pretty good. They were pretty solid. They were a step up from what they were with the Angels. And the Phils, when they made that trade for him, they kind of, his defense is great, but they thought that they could improve his bat, and they did for the small sample size they did when he was with the Phils. So I'm very interested to see what he's going to be for the Phils this year. And so until Harper comes back, it's really going to, be on those guys like the Schwarbers, the Turners, the Real Mutos. And the big ones, like I said before, Castellanos. Castellanos is a huge X factor. I just want to see him go back to at least be who he was with the Tigers. But again, just like I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, it's more on the starting pitching staff, the bullpen, to close out games, and those key cogs in the Phillies lineup. Even I didn't even mention Rhys Hoskins. I'd like to see Rhys continue to do what he does, but maybe in a contract year, maybe he steps up a little bit. Maybe he gives a 35 to 40 homer season, because I feel like he might have it in him. I think he's topped out at just in the the lower 30s, which is great. But maybe they need a little bit more consistent production for Rhys Hoskins as well. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be hopefully it's not a long 3 months until the All-Star break, which is when he's slated to get back. But I think they could play well without him, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really hope that he comes back strong when it does. But until then, we'll see how the Phillies act and react, having a guy like Derek Hall probably taking most of those DH roles. Let's talk about that rotation, because this rotation is fun. I mean, let's just be honest with that. Aaron Nola, I think, is one of those players that doesn't get enough credit. We did our top 10 pitchers the other day on our show, and we had him in the top 5. And we really believe that Aaron Nola is up there. Zach Wheeler, obviously a fantastic pitcher. You mentioned earlier Walker coming over from the Mets in free agency. Ranger Suarez had some pretty fun games last season as well. And then there's an open spot possibly. Maybe Bailey Falter, like you said. Maybe a prospect coming up like Painter. What's your thoughts on this rotation? This could come into play as well, as you mentioned, with the defensive possible woes, hopeful improvements with a guy like Turner coming in, and maybe a slip of offensive production because Harper's not there. However, you mentioned that they play just fine without him, but the rotation is going to be a big deal for the Phillies this season.
Yeah, so obviously the top end of the rotation, I'm always high on. When you have Wheeler and you have Nola, since Wheeler signed with the Phils, in 2020, and I think every Phillies fan thought that was going to be um, bit of an overpay, and it's been the complete opposite. I mean, it's been a steal. Wheeler's been one of the better pitchers in baseball since they signed him in 2020. Just as long as he can stay healthy for the most part, love Wheeler as 1A and 1B with Aaron Nola. And Aaron Nola also been. I love that. I love that you're giving Nola that credit, because a lot of people in Philadelphia, the conversation here has been, oh, is he a true ace? Is he not? This and that. And if you look at his overall numbers, he has been a great pitcher for the most part over the last 4 or 5 years, minus maybe your 2021 season where he kind of took a step back a little bit, wasn't able to, close at bats out, and would kind of, next thing you know, he'd have a 3 or 4 shutout innings, but the 4th or 5th inning comes and he's given up a home run, and then it's 4 earned on the day for Nola. It doesn't look great, even though he had mostly a good outing. But Nola bounced back last year, had a great year, had a couple of really good postseason starts, but had a couple of bad ones too. But just as far as the team's concerned, throughout the regular season, I am confident with Nola, confident with Wheeler at the top of the rotation. Taijuan Walker, I think, is a good 4, a good 3, or I mean, really Ranger or Taijuan Walker, however you want to do it. They're 3 and 4, however you want to mix it up, doesn't matter. Whether either of them's going the 3rd or 4th day, it doesn't matter. Both of them are good pitchers. Ranger, I had this feeling that Ranger could have a bit of a breakout season, and boy, that would be huge for the Phils. I don't know what it is. I don't know if this isn't any analytics or analysis, just my gut feeling, as a fan. I think Ranger could have a breakout season. I kind of compared it to, and maybe they don't have the same exact stuff, but Julio Urias with the Dodgers. Maybe some people don't consider him the best pitcher on the Dodgers when you have your Kershaws and your Buehlers over there. But Urias has been, one of the better pitchers in baseball too. I could see maybe Ranger steps up in this kind of rotation where you have Wheeler and Nola at the top, and Ranger could have a good season. I hope he does, because it would be huge for the rotation. And again, with Taijuan Walker, I thought it was a good addition. Maybe I wouldn't give him all that money, but look at the market. Look at Machado, just got 11 years, $350 million. So what is really an underpay? What's an overpay? I don't know anymore. Who knows when this is gonna stop? Maybe players are getting $3 billion in 2 years. I have no idea. Who knows what Ohtani's gonna get? But then at the back end of the rotation, a lot of Phillies fans, as they should be, and myself as well, I'm super excited to see what Andrew Painter can do. He's definitely going to, we're going to see him this week in spring training. I don't know against who it's going to be, but in spring training, who cares who it's against? So I want to see Painter. The only thing I'm skeptical about a little bit is that it's not like everyone here is like, oh, well, Dave Dombrowski has this like great track record of bringing up young pitchers and them, doing really well, like a la Verlander. I'm trying to think of who else he brought up that ended up being really good. But on the other side, though, you have your Jeremy Bondermans of the world who were terrible. I think he got brought up at 20 years old. I think Dombrowski was in the front office at that time, and he did not have a good career. So while I'm coming off the year that they had in the World Series, I'm confident in Dombrowski, but at the same time, I just want the organization to be careful with Painter. If they like what they see from him in spring training, great. If you want to give him a shot at that fifth starter spot to start off the season, great. But he has 1 or 2 bad starts, or even 3 or 4. Get Bailey Falter in there. I thought he had a good second half of 2022, and I think he, I'm okay with Bailey Falter being the 5th guy. It really just depends on the spring. What happens this spring? It depends on if what kind of spring Painter has. And again, I don't want them to rush him. It's going to be interesting, but I think it's going to be between Falter and Painter. The organization, as I think Toppers mentioned, like Christopher Sanchez, Michael Plasmeyer, but we all know it's probably going to be between Painter and Falter. But overall, the rotations could be good this year. It definitely could be good.
Yeah. Well, I think the best thing about having a top prospect in with a competitive team is exactly that. If you do not have to push him, I mean, if you look at this rotation and you talk about Falter being a guy that could fill into that fifth spot just fine, no problem at all. So even if you see some good things from Painter, but maybe one or two little adjustments, so you're like, man, we could just work with him for another month or so in AAA and then get him up here. Go for it, because there's no reason to rush him. But I do think he's going to be a stud. What's a couple other prospects that you're looking forward to this season? Obviously, Painter being one of them. Any other guys? I like to bring it up this year because with the MLB TV package, you also get minor league baseball this year. So I'm encouraging everyone this season to get a lot more minor league action into their resume. Watch them. So what's maybe another prospect or two that you're excited in the Phillies organization to watch? Maybe make a major league debut, or just someone who it's just going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So going to stay in the pitching department with Andrew Painter. I don't know if these two guys will make a debut in the majors this year, maybe depending on how well they do, in the minors this year. But Mick Abel, Griff McGarry are the other two big. It's kind of like, I guess here in Philadelphia, it's like the big three with this trio of prospects. But Andrew Painter, Mick Abel, Griff McGarry, they're supposed to be like the future of a Philadelphia rotation, which I'm super ecstatic about. I hopefully Painter turns out to be, this true ace in the future. Abel and McGarry, not as high as highly touted prospects, but they're up there. I think they were both in the top 100, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but either way, like the organization is super high on Painter, Mick Abel, Griff McGarry. Again, I don't, and the beautiful part is they don't have to push those other guys right now because they have the depth, and the player development has gotten much better, especially with Preston Mattingly at the helm there for player development for the Phils. Abel, McGarry, those are two definitely to watch. I'm definitely, like you talked about with the minor league package, definitely going to be trying to watch as much as I can. Whenever I find out they're starting a game, I definitely need to be watching, or any other Phillies fan or baseball fan for that matter. Turn it on to see those two guys because Abel, Painter, and McGarry could be a future stacked, three-headed monster of a rotation in the future. So Abel, McGarry, even like a Johan Rojas out there in center field. He was supposed to be one of the more highly touted prospects for the Phils. They love his defense. His bat is coming along. I believe he hit a home run yesterday. So, I mean, I guess good signs of things to come, maybe. Johan Rojas is somebody to watch. I don't know. Maybe they need some outfield depth this year, so they could maybe you do see Johan Rojas this year. It's a possibility. So those three, maybe an Andrew Baker as well. I really liked his stuff yesterday against the Twins. He's got a nasty fastball and a great breaking ball. So he's someone else to watch. So I just say those four for now. But obviously the big one is Andrew Painter, and then Abel McGarry as well. Maybe this time next year when we talk, Christian, those guys will be, maybe they'll have come off a great 2023, and we're talking about them making some type of, big league debut for those guys. So definitely the three big pitching prospects, I would say, as far as prospects go.
I love it. All right, let's put this all together. Obviously, last season, the biggest question we asked was, can they make the playoffs? They did that. They shocked us. And let's be honest, they shocked us. Philadelphia sports are just shocking us this year. Obviously, before the air, I told you how wrong I was about the Eagles. Well, I was not wrong. I guess I didn't say wrong about the Phillies, but they definitely
did you pick
us.
The Birds to win the Super Bowl? Just curious. Did you pick the Eagles to win the Super Bowl?
I honestly, if I'm being completely honest, once the Bills got out, I lost a lot of thoughts, but I did pick the Eagles to win only because Coach Sirianni is from where I grew up in that area. So I did root for the Eagles. Yeah, he grew up about half hour away from where I grew up. So yeah, I did root for him. It was an interesting game. But for these Phils, they went 87-75 last year, finished third in the NL East. Let's put it in this kind of perspective here. Obviously, the NL East is one of the toughest divisions in baseball. You can make the argument it's the toughest division in baseball. Instead of facing the teams like Braves and the Mets, Marlins and Nationals 19 times, you're going to face them 13 times. Where do you see the Phillies finishing in the NL East this year? Is it still third place? Is it higher? And then with 87 wins, do you see that over or under?
So I'm definitely taking the over. Christian, I don't know if you have seen, and I get it that Bryce Harper's out. I get it, he's out until the All-Star break. I don't know if you've seen the World Series odds from a number of betting companies or just websites in general. A lot of them don't have the Phillies in the top 10 for World Series odds, which, look, I haven't really thought about who I think is going to win the World Series this year. Look, we got a long ways to go anyway. The fact that there's some of these companies are saying like the Giants or the Brewers have a better shot than the Phils. I don't care. We're better teams than they are without Bryce Harper. You asked about the over. I'm definitely going over 87 wins. I'd say if I had to make, if my official prediction would probably be like 91-71 and getting a wild card spot. I still think, and this is a regular season we're talking about. This isn't just playoffs.
Right.
This is regular season we're talking about. Braves and Mets are still better. Like the Phils got to the World Series last year, but we're talking about through a full 162. The Braves and Mets are still better teams. You can say whatever you want to say about the Mets, and hey, I'll gladly join in there. I hate the Mets. So the Mets are still a better team overall. They just added Justin Verlander. You added Kodai Senga this year. Like, you still have Scherzer there now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens as far as health goes with Scherzer and even Verlander too. But they're still better. They're still better teams than they are. The Braves just had two guys go 1-2 in Rookie of the Year voting last year with Strider and Michael Harris. Vaughn Grissom's going to be interesting to see what happens with him, and him probably being the starting shortstop for the Braves, I think. But the Braves are getting Acuna back this year for hopefully, and this is a baseball fan. You'd like to see him be healthy for the entire season. The Braves are stacked, man. The Braves are stacked. The Mets are stacked. I still think they're better than the Phils. But, the Phils proved last year you can get that last wild card spot. I don't think they'll have to do that this year. I think they can get the first or second one, which is definitely a step in the right direction. And again, you don't have to win your division to make it to the World Series. It'd be nice, but I don't see the Phils winning their division this year, barring any injuries or any other crazy things. I get it that the amount of divisional games has decreased this year, but I still think, regardless, the Mets and Braves are better. But I'd like the Phils to finish 91-71. I like them to get a wild card spot. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
All right. So you talk about how, just like last year, they didn't win the division, but still made the playoffs. You see some kind of improvement, at least in the wild card standings. But as you mentioned, you don't have to win your division to make it to the World Series. Can you see that happening again in 2023 with the Phillies squad? Can you see them back in the Fall Classic against hopefully not the Houston Astros? I'd like to see somebody else, but just the change of scenery. But can you see Philadelphia getting back into the Fall Classic this year?
Yeah. So yes, especially if Harper comes back and he's Bryce Harper. Absolutely, they proved it last year that they could do it. You got leaders in the clubhouse there, and your Schwarbers, your Wheelers, even Rhys Hoskins. I know Phillies fans don't want to hear that, but Rhys Hoskins is definitely a leader in that clubhouse. Your Trey Turner's there now. He's won a World Series. And now that you have more depth in the rotation, you're not just relying on your Nola and your Zach Wheeler to have great, amazing starts for you to have a chance. Now you have Taijuan Walker, and now we'll see what happens with Bailey Falter and Andrew Painter. But the point being, they have more depth with the rotation. The lineup. We'll see what happens. But if they're hot clicking at the right time going into the playoffs and the offense is clicking, then look out. And then as far as the bullpen goes, I think it's huge because really all the Phils did was they relied on Jose Alvarado and Dominguez to come in there after, your Wheelers or your Nolas gave you good 6 or 7 innings. Now you don't have to just rely on that. You don't have to just rely on that. Now you got your Gregory Soto, you got your Matt Strahm, you got your Craig Kimbrell. I think there's pressure that's going to be relieved off of all those 5 or 6 guys. And yeah, they proved that they could do it with a very thin depth last year. And I don't see why they couldn't get back there. It's just, and this, Christian, like, it's really about who's clicking, who's hot at the right time. I always revert to the 2007 Rockies. I mean, that team was so hot going from September to October. It's really about who's playing baseball, the best baseball at the right time. Like, that's really what it's about. So I think the Phillies could do that because they proved it last year.
There you have it. Francisco Rojas, everyone, thank you so much for joining me on this team preview for the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, man, what a year they had last year. Let's see if they can repeat it this year, and let's see what happens with Bryce Harper. Let everyone know where they can find you, what you got coming up, all the socials, all that good stuff. Mike is yours, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it, man. So the shift with not only Francisco Rojas now, also my guy Nick Earnshaw. We are collaborating to do the shift on YouTube. It's also on podcast platforms. We're doing it once a week. I also still drop. I do a solo video once a week. I just did a video on. We talked a lot about. It seems like a lot of fans like to talk about, myself included, which players are going to benefit from the new rules this year. But I decided, hey, let's talk about somebody that's going to least benefit from the new rules this year. So I did a video on that. Go find out who that player is. It's the shift on YouTube, and go find it. And, the shift baseball on YouTube to be an easier find for you searching on the tube. So, make sure go check that out. Also, like I said, once a week, the Shift podcast with me and Nick every week, and 1 video per week. And follow me on Twitter, where you can find all that stuff. And we can talk baseball. We can talk all sports, no matter what. I'm a 4for4 guy as well. So at Rojas_media_, go follow me there. So
fantastic. And all that stuff also will be down in the episode description below. So if you're having a hard time finding it, just click that link and we'll get it right to you there. Hit that subscribe button, hit like, comment, all that good stuff. We'll be back here with another episode of the Brow Report here by the OK Baseball podcast, presented by Slasher Sports, because we still have plenty of team previews to go. And opening day is now just over a month away. We're almost there, Frankie. We're almost there. It's going to be great. Obviously, check into our feed, as we will be giving you more and more content every single day. Something else is coming out this afternoon as well. So be paying attention to the feed. We'll see you back here with another episode soon. Take care, guys.